Welcome to Northwestern Wise, our wisdom and innovation thought leadership series at Northwestern Health Sciences University. My name is Michelle Myers, and we're here today with Dr. Deb Bushway, who's the president and CEO of Northwestern Health Sciences University. Welcome, Deb.
Thank you. It's exciting to be here with you.
Good. Well, we're going to take the next few minutes to talk a little bit about integration and integrative healthcare models.
Perfect.
And we thought it'd be good to start with maybe you sharing with us, what is your definition of integration?
Such a good question. And as you know, well, we have spent some time talking that through here at Northwestern Health Sciences University. And I think we've landed on something that is fairly simple when you think about it, but also helps guide us. And it is this definition that says at the very center is the patient's presenting concern. So the patient and their needs, his or her, their needs are at the very center. Surrounding that patient is each healthcare practitioner really operating at the top of the scope of their practice, the top of their capability, bringing all of their strengths to bear on the needs of that patient. But the third, and maybe the most essential and maybe the most challenging part, is that each healthcare professional also understands fairly deeply what the other professionals around bring to the table in the service of bringing positive health outcomes to that patient at the middle.
So a fairly dynamic model.
Yes.
Lots of facets.
Lots of facets, lots of changing, and lots of activity, communication. This is not a stagnant do it once kind of thing that happens. This is a mindset, a process.
Mm-hmm. So would you say that communication is really central to this model?
I definitely would. Communication and respect, right?
Oh. Tell me more about the respect piece.
So in order to understand someone else deeply, I really believe you have to have respect for them so that you're open to what they bring to the table, whether it's from their professional point of view, from their insights into what the patient might be telling you, so that you're able to listen fully and openly. And then we can knit together the best solution for the patient at the center.
It's a beautiful model.
Yeah.
So how long have you been involved with the complementary and integrative healthcare community?
Well, so it depends on where you draw the starting line, like everything, right? So I'm a psychologist and have been working as a psychologist since the 80s, right? And at that time, I was already interested. I think you cannot be a psychologist, a practitioner, without understanding pretty deeply the connection between mind, body, and spirit, right? So if you go with that definition, I've been doing it for a long time. Mm-hmm. One of the stories I was telling someone is that there's a federal prison here in the state of Minnesota, and I taught holistic health to them back in the early 90s. So moving through all of those times, I actually taught here at Northwestern Health Sciences University some psychology back in the mid-90s as well.
Oh.
So if you take that kind of definition, it's been quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
If you take my time here at Northwestern Health Sciences as a more precise starting time, then that's like 4 years or so. But I think you have to bring in all of the history.
Sure. Yeah, and you bring a really rich professional background to bear in this conversation. So I'm interested in, over the last several decades, how have you seen integrative healthcare change over that time?
It's such a good question, and it's so interesting because we are now positioned at this moment in time that I think is so important for integrated healthcare. There's all this opportunity, all this demand. The world needs the solutions that are integrated, right? And definitely our country desperately needs the solutions that are integrated. But I would have thought that we would be further along. If I took where we were 20 years ago in this conversation, I would have thought we would make more progress by 2019 than we've made. And I think it's because this, like any change process, has its ups and downs. And you hope that the overall trajectory is a positive line. But there's been some setbacks, I think, for the integrative care industry. And some of them we're simply not understanding, I think, the financial benefits that integrative care can bring to the table for the nation's healthcare problems.
And do you think that that's from the public doesn't appreciate the financial benefit to integrative healthcare, or healthcare systems and how the payment system is designed, or what are your thoughts around that?
So I think it's a good combination of all this, right? Mm-hmm. So I think the public doesn't necessarily understand. We haven't maybe done as good a job as I was hopeful would be done by this point in time, helping the public understand what all these integrative solutions are and how they can be brought together. Because we haven't been good at bringing them together, there are still a lot of barriers for the public to access some of these. And so then they don't understand the big picture financial benefit for them.
Okay.
But also I think the payers have, and I think many of them are agreeing with us these days. There's increasing awareness of the positive impact for the long-term care of someone, of using these integrative approaches sooner in a person's sort of episode of care.
Okay. So while the integration perhaps has done this over time, do you feel like the overall trajectory has been a positive trend?
I do.
You do?
I mean, I do. I think that maybe slower than I would have imagined 20 years ago, but it's exciting right now. We're in a moment of some acceleration and some opportunity, and I think we just have to be ready to participate and encourage that acceleration, right?
Yeah. To that end, what do you think is the most important thing our integrative healthcare community can do to accelerate?
Yeah. So I would say there's probably two areas of work that we can do that will help us continue this acceleration. And one is to increase adoption and or demand of these of integrative care. And the second is to remove active barriers, right? And both of those are informed by some things that we can talk about, but let me talk about each one really briefly separately. So what I mean by increased demand is that patients have to start demanding, right? Mm-hmm. And as patients demand, healthcare systems will listen. I mean, it takes a while, it's frustrating, it doesn't happen overnight, it doesn't take one patient making that demand, but a consistent growth of patients demanding will change things. That will only happen if people understand the benefit, right? They have to deeply understand the benefit. So we've got sort of a PR issue. We've got to help the public understand how receiving integrative care is to their benefit, right? Then they will begin to demand. Then we also need adoption among practitioners. So this is why I say it's both a demand/adoption. So if I go to a traditional MD and present problems that could well be best treated in a non-pharmacological way by some of these integrative care practitioners, that MD has to have something flip in their mind that they understand enough to make that referral, make that suggestion, educate that patient to bring them to it if they're not demanding it, right? So it's both a patient and a healthcare system sort of adoption curve. We've got to keep pushing up that curve, right? And then the other thing is to remove barriers. And by barriers, it can be everything from stigma about who what integrative care is and what does that mean, to copays that in systems that I know there are some systems that are starting to make some changes there. So removing those kinds of barriers, different copays for integrative care than there might be for going to a traditional provider. To simply licensure barriers, other kinds of barriers that are public policy things that we also have to be engaging in that conversation to continue the removal of the barriers while we drive up the adoption and demand. And then I think we end up in a spot where we get increased access, increased affordability, and probably just better healthcare outcomes, right?
Mm-hmm. So are there specific things that we as an educational institution can or should be doing to decrease those barriers and accelerate the adoption?
Yeah, really good question. So yes. Key, I think there's two big categories, well, I'm going to say three big categories for us. One is we ought to be educating our practitioners in an integrative way. So we make sure that everyone that leaves that graduates from our programs feels confident about what they bring to the table, understands what other people bring to the table, and also understands how to build bridges with practitioners in that respect and kind of listening sort of way. So educationally, we have to move that forward. We need to continue to do research where we can, and to help disseminate the research that exists out there to both our students, our practitioners, but also to payers, to public policy makers, to other practitioners in other healthcare systems out there, because evidence of whatever form is going to drive the change for people. People will hear the narrative, they'll hear the stories, but people really feel most comfortable in many of these arenas being driven by evidence. The third area is that we have to continue to engage in the public policy discussions, which I know you've done a great job of doing and we continue to do, but we have to really take seriously stepping into the conversations. We have to challenge ourselves to take positions where we have strong beliefs and we have evidence behind us, and we have to just stay in this for the long haul in those three arenas, in terms of educating people, helping with the public policy, and helping both build the data and the evidence, but also disperse the evidence and make it consumable for people.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does. So to that end, do you feel like the integrative healthcare community has found its voice yet?
I think it's always had a voice, right? I think it's, so yes, I think it's found its voice. I think times change and voices have to change. And so how we talk about what we're doing, how we bring our evidence to the table, how we advocate for our patients, that changes with the needs and the zeitgeist, the circumstance that we find ourselves in. So yes, and we have to keep changing and growing and developing that voice, in my opinion.
As a society, as the culture, as the climate changes and grows as well.
As the questions are different, right?
Oh,
We can't
yeah.
have the same answers to different questions. But you're right, as the society shifts, as the demands shift, as the questions are different, as the skepticism takes a different form, we have to have new answers and new positions, and we have to be nimble as well. We can't just demand that others be nimble, right?
Right, right. So as things change, the zeitgeist changes over time, and as acceptance and barriers do this over time, what is your vision for integrative care maybe 10 or 20 years from now?
A vision for 20 years from now would be that we're not talking about integrative care so much, we're talking about care. And it just is. It just is integrative. The assumption is that the best practice is integrative. We're not having to clarify, and that actually people would be looked upon with some degree of skepticism if they weren't integrating, and there wasn't this sort of circle of diverse providers surrounding each of our healthcare needs as we move forward. So actually that would be my vision, but we all know my favorite quote, which is that vision without execution is just a hallucination. So we have to execute in order to get there, right? We can't just sit around and hope for that, or we'll be here in 20 years sort of saying what I said earlier, which is, gosh, I thought we'd be farther by now.
And that's where an institution like Northwestern Health Sciences University has the unique opportunity you mentioned before.
Absolutely, we do. We have the perfect opportunity. The zeitgeist is right for our solutions. It is a moment in time when people they're hungry for new ways to solve these problems, and we have some solutions. So it's on us to get out there and participate in that.
That's great. Well, we know our charge.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you, Deb.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thanks for joining this installment of Northwestern Wise. If you'd like to contact Deb Bushway or me, Michelle Myers, with any comments or questions, we'd love to hear from you. Feel free to reach out by phone or by email.